Yeah, hi and welcome back. Today I want to show you how to write a plugin user interface with Rust. And I think there are some really nice ways to do it. You have different options. Today I will show you egui, and this is how it looks. So just a very basic window with a gain slider, a little peak meter, and a mute knob. And if we play it here, let's check it. You see that the peak meter is working. It will turn red if it's above 0. And the gain slider works. And you can also mute it. Yeah? So very simple here, but already quite nice and modern looking, I think, for very basic UI layouts. And you see it's connected to those values. So everything you do here is reflected in the UI. Also here with the mute. And yeah, I think it works already great. So let's have a look together how to build this. First, I'm using the framework egui from Emil Enderfeld. I don't know if I pronounce it right. And it's quite interesting because it's an immediate mode UI. I think it's actually the most simple way to build user interfaces. Yeah. The cool thing is it's like an audio process. Everything renders every frame. So every time the UI changes on the screen, this code is getting run. So it's very easy. You don't have to care about states, about signals, what is changing what, and so on. Like, it's very, very simple to build it. And I like the idea, the mind model of it. I think it's coming from game engines, actually, where you have to re-render anyways every frame. But there are ways to make this more efficient. So under the hood, it's a bit more efficient than that. Anyways, you're not allowed to block in here. So always when you have something inside of here that would take a longer amount of time, you have to do it in another thread. So a bit like in an audio process, actually. And here you see how it is. So you just declare a heading, then you can have a horizontal part here. And you see how nice it is. You have, for example, UI.button. You give the button a name, and then this button has a response that you can ask here. Like, was it clicked? Was it hovered? Whatever. And then if it is clicked, we just increase age by 1. Yeah, so very, very simple here. And the state just is, just can live anywhere. It doesn't need to be a crazy mutex or crazy send. It's just a reference to the value because it's always reflected in the UI. That's very cool. All right. If you want to check out, here are some nice examples with a little bit about what actually immediate mode is and what you have to care about. And here's a nice web example. If you go to egui.rs, and here you will find some basic things. So you see there are drop-down menus already built in, some buttons, checkboxes, links, whatever. Yeah, you can just play around here with a lot of different things. And it's quite fast. So even they have like this plot module here, and I think it works really great. Yeah, so zooming here is just so quick. Everything is immediate mode. Also, all those state like those states here are always synchronized, and you cannot just really mess anything up, or not that easy. Yeah? In classical UIs or retain mode UIs, you always have the problem that you have to update things, and sometimes you can forget this, or then something does not change as you want to. So I kind of like this idea. Also here you have some more ideas. But let's have a look into the project. So where we stopped last time, if we go to the main branch again, what we actually had was, let me go back here, was just this gain plugin. We called it my plugin with just a simple gain, and the process function that is just applying this gain. Yeah. And because we have the parameter here with this derive macro params and this ID, it's getting made public to the DAW, and that's why we can see it actually here. Yeah, so that's enough that it shows up here in the plugin UI. I don't know what's happening here. All right, so then let's switch to only slider. So you see what actually changes to have a plugin editor here, to have a UI. So the first thing is we need to add NIH plug egui additionally. Yeah, there are 3 frameworks that are already wired up. That is egui, iced, and Visia, or I don't actually know how to pronounce it. But you see it works. Just add this framework here. And then in lib.rs, we can add this editor state. That's just, you see, it's also basically sent to the DAW, but this just means this persist thing here just means it should be reconstructed when we open the plugin again or we save the state, but it's nothing that the DAW sees or that the user can change. Yeah, so that's quite cool that we have this functionality. And also here we start this egui state with the size. And the other thing that's really just changing is here. Now we add this editor function. Yeah, that's optional to implement because we don't need an editor necessarily. And here the editor is getting returned. So everything we need is a function where we have this editor inside. And if we jump into that, you will see that it's so easy. That is really cool. So we go into this module and everything we have is just this one function. And this one function contains our whole editor. Yeah, so in this case, this create editor function is already is a function here from the framework. And then here's this show function. And inside of show, we can just write down our UI. And this is getting rendered each time, right? So we can say, okay, we want to have a heading. That's just, this is just a header font text. Then we can add some space. So yeah, the layout here is basically top down. Then you can say, for example, this horizontal part here, then everything inside of here will be next to each other horizontally. And we want to have a label gain slider, and then we add our slider. And the slider needs this from get set function that we can actually call those parameter changes for the DAW. Yeah, that's in Juice, it's the same. You have kind of this begin set parameter, end set parameter. This is just now plugin specific. Yeah, inform the host that you will start automating a parameter. Yeah, that's you don't need this if you build your own audio backend or something necessarily. Yeah, it's but here for DAW we need that, and then we actually set the parameter. Yeah. And with the slider, it's just a pre-made component from egui. We have the option to show the value as a little icon box next to it and show a suffix with the decibels. And you see we have the range -10 to 10. That's just the range we were also choosing here. Yeah, now not very automated, but it's fine for now. Let's build this and see how it looks. Yeah, again, cargo X task bundle, my plugin release. And then we copy our clap plugin again in the clap folder, and you see that Bitwig automatically crashes the plugin, and I can just reload it, and here it is. Yeah, so that's really just this basic gain slider, and we can test it. Great, works. Yeah? And also here, when I change this, the UI still shows it. So that's pretty cool, and that's all because of here this little function. And because the parameters were already connected. Yeah, you see, everything we did for this is adding the parameters, the plugin params, to our create function. And this arc is just a pointer. Yeah, that means we can have multiple pointers to the same object in different threads. So we can access it from the UI, and we can access it from let me scroll down here from the process buffer. Yeah. So params is just this arg, atomic reference counter or atomic reference counted object. Here you see a thread safe reference counting pointer. So yeah, that's all it is. Let me drink something. So yeah, but how can we extend this? I think for me the most interesting thing is when I want to develop a plugin or I want to choose a UI framework is actually how can I write my own components? Because yeah, it's nice to have this ready-made slider. Cool, it works, but I want to have a custom UI. Yeah, I don't want to use this design here. I want to implement my own design or the design that my designer made for me. So how do we actually paint here? How do we draw lines, rectangles, and so on, and change them interactively? And I think that's also quite easy because everything we basically need is a function. Yeah, we just create a function, my component, and everything we need in there is this little UI object here. I always call it object. That's not necessarily true or not very rusty. Sorry for that. But this is just this, this UI thing. So let's add it here. UI and mute UI. This should be enough. And then we can just say UI.painter.rect. Yeah, and this is just, now we can say which rectangle, which corner radius, which fill color, and which stroke to paint outside. And this is just if the stroke should be outside or inside of the component. And this is how we paint a rectangle. And there's also UI.painter.circle. And there is, I think, .line. Yeah. So here you have a horizontal line, a vertical line, or any line. And with this, we can just connect dots. And so you can draw really everything you want. And for SVGs, it's also quite easy. In plugins, you have to load very often SVGs, right? Like knobs from the designer or something. And this is here just this image field. Yeah? But here it's saying, actually, it's recommended, if we scroll up a bit, actually, it's recommended to use it like this. So image new, then we include the image. Here's the PNG. And then there's this paint add function where we have the rectangle of the size where actually this picture should be drawn. Yeah. So I think, and that's all we need. Yeah. So for example, if we would have this function, we just leave it like this, we would really just say, okay, it still needs to return something. I forgot about this. But we would just add, I don't know, add it here like this, UI.add, and then, or just my component, UI. Yeah, that would be already enough actually. And then we draw those things. So I love this functional approach. It's pretty cool. Let's see how an actual component looks. So maybe I can just switch to the other branch. Slider and mute, because here I already implemented an on component. I copied it from the example basically, but this is the toggle UI. And you see, everything we do is we call the function. We give it our parameter mute that we access here from our plugin state. And then this is returning a response. And if it changed, this mute parameter, then we can call again the set parameter, get parameter, and so on. Yeah, and begin set and end set. And the toggle UI, as I said, it's just a function. Here it receives the UI. Here it receives if the toggle should be on or not, and it can change it because if the user clicks on it, it should be changed. And then you see that this part is really just to check where this rectangle should actually be. And there are some helpers. For example, there's this interact size. Interact size just makes sure that the widgets never get too small. So it's like just a design system that is built in for minimum size, but you don't have to use it. Yeah, you can really just draw it anywhere you want and in the size you want. So this is just to make components a little bit more equal. And then you see there is this response coming from allocate exact size. And we want to sense a click. Yeah, that's what we are waiting for. You see there are also other things we can sense for, like click and drag, focus, whatever. Yeah, hover. There are multiple things we can listen to. And here we will check if it's clicked. And if this rectangle was clicked, we can just change on our on value. And then we say mark changed. Yeah, notify the UI that a value has changed. This will just do this part here. Yeah, it will just let us know from outside if something actually changed. And it's necessary, so we can set the parameters. And then everything we do is just here UI.painter.rect. And we draw a rectangle, and we draw a circle, and so on. Yeah, this is all pretty basic. Also here, this BG fill is just from this visual component, which is just a design system that is built in, so everything looks similar. But you can also just use any kind of color. Yeah, color 32 from RGB, or just use red or blue. Yeah, there are some built in already. So quite simple. Let's return here. Yeah, I really love this approach that you have a full component in one function, and you can place this function anywhere and just add it here as you want. Yeah, so let's build this and see how it looks. Reload the plugin and check. Now we have the smooth slider. Yeah, that's the whole component. And you see it's connected because we read from our state, and we set the parameter here accordingly. And if we look into the audio code, how that actually looked, yeah, we added this mute parameter here with the ID as a bool param. Then here we just set bool param with the name mute, and default is false. And in our processing code, I just checked if the value is set. And in that case, we just say gain should be 0, yeah, the linear gain. And that's it. Very, very basic. And we can also check that it works. Pretty cool. Nice. Yeah, and then let's see how we can build this level meter, which is a little bit more interesting maybe. And then you also see that, yeah, you can build it like a function, your own component, but you don't have to. So when we change here to the level meter, let's go to the full UI. The level meter, or peak meter, I called it here different. That's not nice. Let's just rename it. Module peak meter, and you see it automatically changes the file name as well. That's the nice Rust LSP. But something here went wrong. All right. That should be it. The peak meter is now a struct, so it's not only a function anymore. And the reason for that is just we maybe want to have a local state that just lives in our peak meter, like our range, our dB, some stuff. Yeah, we don't need to do this. We could also just build it in a function. That sometimes is just a bit nicer if you have a struct, and then you can have a new function to generate it. And we actually generate this every frame, yeah, because it's just the instruction on how to paint things. Let's have a look. You implement widget for peak meter, and widget just tells where we render. So it's saying here, yeah, again, we check our desired size with this interaction size. We allocate the size from the UI. Here we say it's non-interactive, because we don't need to sense any click or so at the moment for our level meter. And here again, we paint it. Yeah, so that's the whole function we need to implement if we want to have a structure as a widget. All right, and in the paint level meter function, we also just have a rectangle background. And it's quite easy. Yeah, here we just check our level dB. There are some remap functions, so we map it from this level dB range to left and right of the rectangle. So that's pretty easy. And we clamp it so it doesn't overflow. And then we say when the level dB is smaller than 0, we can paint green and otherwise red. And here we just paint our rectangle with this color. Yeah? So super easy. And then we can draw a label on top of it if we want. Yeah, here we just use the same rectangle, the left side. And then we just draw our value. So yeah, I really like that. And then how do we add it actually in the editor? It's happening here. Yeah, so we again say we want to have it horizontal. First the label at the left side. Then we load our peak meter and add it to the UI. Yeah, and because it's a struct and not a function, we have to call it in this UI.add. And then we can add this peak meter because it's implementing widget. And here you see it has to implement widget, right? And we did that with the UI function. Yeah, and here you also see the builder pattern. Yeah, show label is just takes self and not as a reference, but moves it inside and then returns it again. Yeah, so then we can have setting functions like this, like new, show label, set some settings up, and it looks like this. Yeah, that we can also we can always do dot 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 here to set some settings that we don't always want to set. And that's just a nice way of getting around that Rust cannot have optionally more. And we cannot do this. It always has to have this amount of parameters. So if there's something we just sometimes want to set, we can do it like this in Rust. All right. And let's have a look how this connection here actually works, because this is now not a plugin parameter. Yeah, the peak meter value is not known by the DAW. It's not necessary to know it. Let's look inside of our code here. And you see now we don't store it in plugin params. We just store it in my plugin, the peak meter here, because it never has to be known by the DAW. So everything we just want to know inside of our plugin and which does not have to be restored on load, we can just store here. And you see it's again an arc and then an atomic F32. And the reason for that again, arc, because we want to clone it. We want to have two pointers, one from the audio thread and one from the UI thread. And the arc just allows us to have multiple pointers to one thing. And the atomic is just so we can synchronize it. Yeah, we can have a mutable, or we can change the value and it will be known in the other thread. Yeah, so just the normal atomic. And here you see how we created arc new, atomic new, and we start with minus infinity dB. Also, we have this decay factor for the decay of the level, which is just set here to how fast the value should drop. Yeah, that's not the best way here. We could also calculate the exact milliseconds, which would be a bit nicer, but I just made it very simple here. Yeah, let's check how that looks in the UI. So now we want to check out for our peak in the whole block. And then inside of here, we get our absolute sample value. And if the sample is higher than the block peak, then we just set it to this. So we set the new peak. And here, that's pretty nice. We can check if the editor is actually open. So otherwise, we don't need to do this calculation here in the audio thread. Yeah, that's pretty nice that we have this function here directly. And then we load our current peak meter. and calculate the new one. Yeah, we check if the current peak is higher, we want to jump directly to the new value, so it's responsive. And only in the decay phase, where the values are lower, we just fade down properly. Yeah, so we just use our peak meter value and multiply it with this 0.999 or whatever we think is best here. Then we can just check that it's not too small and then store it again in the peak meter. So that's all that is happening here. Yeah, and to remind you, here in exactly here, we just load the value with relaxed ordering. It just means we don't really care about synchronization or that it's absolutely immediate or how it's reordered. Yeah, it's not very necessary here. And then we just convert it to dB. And also this function is part of the NIH plug framework already. And then we can just load the level here. Yeah, that's pretty nice. All right, so let's have a look at this again. Build it. Copy and reload the plugin. And you see how nice it works. Yeah, that's the fade down here. And also if we go too high, then it turns red. And maybe we can play a little bit around with this value here. So for example, we can make it slower. Now we just change this to 9. Let's build again, copy it. And now we see it drops way slower, right? Cool. So this is the decay phase. Let's change it back to 6. I like that more. And yeah, I know it's a lot maybe here for a video and I have to go over it quite fast. But I think it's a very, it's very good looking code in the end. It's very easy to understand. The synchronization is very nice because Rust guarantees us that everything is accessed right and we don't have any weird issues here. And also this UI framework is just incredibly simple to use in my opinion. But I also have to say, yeah, egui is not necessarily the most powerful one. I mean, just draw everything you want, yeah, it works. But for example, with Iced or with Visia, the other two ones, they are a bit more complex, but you can probably achieve also some more complex things with it. Although for now, I really like this egui approach, yeah, especially for smaller UIs. Just test it out, play around with it. Yeah, this project here is open source. Yeah, here's the Rust audio plugin. And then you just switch the branch to egui UI. And here's the full UI is inside. Yeah, just try it out if you want. And now I also added this main function. So also NIH can open a plugin as standalone. But it's nice to check the UI maybe that you don't have to reload it always here in your DAW. Yeah, but it's not as powerful yet. For example, with input routing and so on. So I like to just stick to Bitwig because I'm really fast here with this reloading of plugins, yeah, and the DAW doesn't crash. Yeah, cool. I hope you're interested and you can maybe think a bit more about. You can imagine how UIs look now. And yeah, I think it's really good to show immediately how to build your own components and how to draw stuff. Yeah, so those two are actually completely custom. All right. Have a great week. See you next time. And yeah, all the best. Bye-bye.